What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Fatboyz Dynasty podcast presented by the Fantasyholics, coming at you live on X, YouTube, and Facebook. Both of us back in person again. I am back from my short stint as a stunt beached whale double, as Brant would like to call me before the show starts, to be back with all of you guys this week. Only maybe a week or two back, and then the other fat boy will be going to get his skin burnt. I do tan a little better than the other one does. But anyway, so you'll have us together at least for this week and next week, hopefully, barring any crazy weather like we were battling back and forth today in Central Illinois. You're in for a good one when all the nation's top storm chasers are huddling up in your towns. So definitely been a crazy stretch, some vacations, some sports. It's been wild, but both of us are here today, Brant. We're going to be going over some, like I titled the episode, some backup plans, which doesn't quite mean what you think it does. Brant, I'll let you tell everybody what we're going to cover today.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some backup running backs that could have fantasy relevancy. We're going to call it the Tyler Algier effect, as we saw him have definitely fantasy relevancy, backing up with one of the best running backs in the NFL, if not the best running back in the NFL. So we're going to talk about a couple guys that, without injuries in front of them, could easily slide into your flex spot or maybe even an RB2, because I think Algier finished well up there this past year with his touchdowns. We're going to talk about two or three guys that could easily slide into those spots, and you could steal late in your drafts or probably get fairly cheap in a lot of places that you could probably go and turn them. Two of my guys have had injury history, and one is stirring up a little bit more right now, but we'll get to that here in just a little bit.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, both of us kind of steered away from some of those, like, quote unquote easier, layups, if you will. Like, we could have picked either running back in Pittsburgh and dubbed them the backup and talked about how those guys are going to have, fantasy relevancy and things of that nature. The Patriots backfield, where I think both Ramondre Stevenson and TreVeyon Henderson have some clear work, where obviously one is the better of the two. But I think we kind of went with a little bit more deeper dives. You mentioned before the show started, I think out of the 6 of them, 5 of these guys probably could be snagged at the tail end of startup drafts, potentially, as you're filling out your roster. So it's just one of those things that maybe it's your handcuff, but maybe it's not. And you go with that, hero or zero running back style draft, and you're towards the end of your draft, and you're like, I better grab some dart throws at the running back position. And these guys could be that for you. So let's get started with it. Brant, you want to take us away first?
Yeah, I'm going to take it away right off the rip. I'm going to go with Tyrone Tracy. I think this is one of the easiest names that we do have on our list of 6. Tracy, he was the lead back there before Cam Scatabo got going there in New York. New coaching staff. 15 games, he finished as RB 28 in PPR, 4.2 yards per carry. He did only have 2 touchdowns, but this is a guy that can show burst. He's willing to catch the ball out of the backfield. He had 48 targets, 36 catches last year. This is a guy that could easily slide into a nice role for New York as they may try to keep Cam Scatabo healthier down the stretch. I could see New York going with a split, a lot like Seattle did, where one week it's Tracy, the next week it's Cam, just to keep them all healthy down the stretch. They've built up that team to compete. I'm not going to say they're going to be on a playoff run and winning a Super Bowl anywhere, but they've got a nice head coach that knows how to run the ball, knows how to keep his running backs healthy. So I think Tracy's a guy that you can steal. He's definitely being drafted, I think, 12 to 14 spots below Cam Scatabo. And this is a guy that could easily take over this role. And we've seen it 100 times. I feel like Cam Scatabo in the medical tent, Cam Scatabo in the medical tent. So Tracy's a guy that could easily slide into that role, even with Cam Scatabo still on the field.
Yeah, this is one of the names that when you first sent me the message that, like, hey, let's cover this week. One of the very first names that crept into my mind, and I swear to God, Brant, the only reason I don't have him on my sheet is because I thought of it. He came to my mind when I was driving a car running to Walmart for one of the 15 trips I've had there in the last 2 days. I'm doing a bathroom remodel at my house, and it never fails. I never have everything I need. So I have back and forth. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. First of all, Cam Scatabo, the way he runs, his running style, the way he plays the game of football, he's never going to be on the field for 100% of snaps, whether he's healthy or not. It's just not going to be something that happens. So Tracy's going to get some playing time regardless. And we saw Tyrone Tracy several times last year take the workload because of the fact that Cam Scatabo was banged up, like you mentioned, in the medical tent, dealing with one of his concussions, his knee injury, whatever the case may be. We saw plenty of Tyrone Tracy. I actually think that's one of the better names on the list because, again, there is very high upside with him in that backfield. As a matter of fact, there's a guy in one of my leagues, one of my dynasty leagues, I own Scatabo. He's the Tyrone Tracy owner. And both times, or both of us have tried to work a trade for the other back. He's tried to come get Cam from me. I've tried to go get Tyrone Tracy from him. And both of us just value both of them too highly to get anything done because it's like, yeah, your guy may be the one that gets some work this week, but next week it's going to be this guy. And it's just one of those spots that I think you hit the nail on the head there, Brant. He is one of those guys that you could definitely plug in at your flex week in and week out because he's going to get you some value.
Yeah, and he's only 26 years of age, 26 and a half years old. So he's still got some time left. He hasn't seen a huge workload. He did have 192 carries in 2024, but he hasn't seen a huge workload. So there's still tread on those tires.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we talk about this, particular position, if you will, on a roster, because every team's got to have backup running backs, right? It's a necessity, even when you have like a Bijan Robinson or Christian McCaffrey, a Derrick Henry, whatever you have it in their prime, you're going to have another running back getting some touches. And this next guy I'm going to talk about, it's only fair to start this conversation by bringing up JJ number 9. Because without this guy, he doesn't have a national championship, and he probably isn't drafted to a national football team, and the Minnesota Vikings probably aren't dealing with him. But I've got Blake Corum on my list, former Michigan Wolverine national champion running back, who JJ kind of rode his coattail in college there. But anyway, Blake Corum is in a offense that the rest of the National Football League tries to emulate, right? Sean McVay is one of the most brilliant offensive minds in the National Football League. More two tight end sets than anybody else in the league last year, which I don't know if everybody out there is aware of this, but when you have two beefier guys that play the tight end position on the field rather than a wide receiver, you know who that works out really well for, Brant? Running backs. Yeah, running backs seem to do really well in systems like that. Now, does Sean McVay stay with that? Does he kind of go away from it? Does the rest of the league catch up to him and he's already on to the next best thing? Who knows? But one thing I will tell you is last year, Blake Corum had 7 weeks with double-digit fantasy production, one of which being as high as running back 3 on the season, on that week. So he's already shown the standalone value. Again, I'm never going to tell you to play fantasy football based on hoping for an injury, but if Kyron Williams were to go out, Blake Corum's an instant bell cow, in my opinion. Out of a 17-game slate, Blake Corum had 8 games with double-digit touches, so they already trust him in the offense. We talk about this Los Angeles Rams team as a Super Bowl contending team prior to the draft. Then they go mess up the draft, and then they go shock the world, get Myles Garrett. But offensively, it's just going to be more of what they already have. The weapons we already see, the weapons they already know, what Sean McVay already trusts, who Matthew Stafford already trusts. Those guys are the ones getting the ball. Blake Corum, again, I think his price tag is probably one of the higher ones on this list. If you wanted to go trade for him or go draft him, you're going to have to pay up a little bit more than you would for a lot of these other names. But again, this is one of those guys to me that I think he's already got the standalone value and one of the best offenses in the National Football League, one of the best run schemes in the National Football League. I think there's a lot of upside for Blake Corum this year.
Yeah, so he's still 25 years old, and we've seen it go from 58 carries in his rookie year to 145 the next year. There's been talk of a 50-50 split there, averaging 5.1 yards per carry. We saw it like you alluded to. You saw it multiple times last year where even with Kyron in the game, he was still able to muster up double-digit fantasy points. I believe Kyron played the whole year as well. So there wasn't any weeks where I think Kyron missed. Of course, with the nice storms here, my phone service wants to be nice and slow and not switch for me. Sure. But yeah, no, Blake Corum's a great guy. He's you and me have talked about it. I thought Kyron, his rookie year, I didn't think Blake was going to have any value. And then we saw 58 carries from him. And I'm like, And then last year was 145. Yeah, I think this is definitely going to be more of a split than a lot of people are thinking.
I agree.
I think that, and I hate that, not trying to, I hate it for fantasy, but the way Seattle did it, I think a lot of teams are going to look at that and be like, wait a minute, look how good Walker was down the stretch when Charbonnet went out. Maybe we need to start doing this a little bit more. And I could see the Rams emulating that. Now, I'm not going to say our offense is the greatest thing and they're going to emulate our whole offense, but I definitely could see them starting to emulate that 50-50 split to keep them healthy down the stretch. As you alluded to, it almost looks like the Rams are going all in just like they did a few years ago. And that might be the best way possible.
Yeah, they're definitely collecting the infinity stones at this point.
Yes. My next guy I'm going to talk about, he's still 27 years old. Injury history has riddled his career. Unfortunately, he was the lead back, got hurt, lost it to Harvey there in Denver. And that's J.K. Dobbins re-signing with the Denver Broncos. He did have another offer, and he still wanted to come back to the Broncos. Sean Payton showed a lot of love for him, as he did see in 10 games. He did have 153 carries. I know it doesn't sound like a whole lot. 772 yards. The explosive ability is there. Five yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. He only had 14 targets with 11 receptions, but this is a guy that, when healthy, he is explosive. We've seen it in Baltimore. We saw it in LA. We saw it in Denver. This is a guy that everyone's still sleeping on. And if he stays healthy, and now they've got Harvey carrying the load or helping to carry the load, and you added Coleman, this is a guy that's going to find his way on the field with how explosive he is and how good he is. And if they find a way to split it, this is a guy that could easily be the leader of that backfield if he's able to play 17 games. Like I said, in 10 games last year, he still finished as RB 43 in that backfield. And we know that Sean Payton likes to lean on the run with the pass catching back as well, and J.K. Dobbins can do both.
Yeah, this is one of your guys that you've been a big fan of since his days as a Buckeye. And injuries have just plagued him every year of his career. But when he's healthy, when he's able to stay on the field, he does some electric stuff with the ball in his hands. I do think when you look at that Denver Broncos offense, I think not just J.K. Dobbins, not just Jonah Coleman, the new one they added, but R.J. Harvey, all three of these guys are going to have touches every week. It's going to be a hot hand, drive to drive. And again, I think when J.K. Dobbins is healthy, there's not a whole lot of backs out there more talented than he is. When he's at 100%, he's very fun to watch. So I tend to agree with you on that one as well, Brant. And honestly, granted, I'm in a lot more leagues than I once was, but I own more shares of J.K. Dobbins than I would have ever have cared to. But at this point, I'm not upset about it. So. All right. Speaking of one I'm not necessarily thrilled to own, but I do see the clear path to value is Isaiah Pacheco, former Kansas City Chiefs running back, currently with the Detroit Lions. A lot of people are speculating Jahmyr Gibbs to have his best year of his career. A lot of people are calling for Jahmyr Gibbs to be RB1 this season. All of those things probably are true. However, we've seen in that system and that offense, there's going to be another running back get the touch, right? David Montgomery out, Isaiah Pacheco in. This one's very simple, scheme fit. Isaiah Pacheco's going to come in. He's going to be the between the tackles guy, give that, break to Jahmyr Gibbs. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Pacheco come in a decent amount near the red zone. I think you're going to talk about Isaiah Pacheco as a guy who comes in and gets 10 to 12 touches a week as a change of pace guy. And I think that's just enough in a Detroit Lions offense to have some fantasy relevancy. Again, who's thinking about Isaiah Pacheco, as the year moves on? Probably not a lot of people, but I do think after 2 or 3 weeks, he's going to be somebody that's a little bit more sought after just because I think he is going to be on the field. I do think he's a tier down from David Montgomery and what David Montgomery was able to do in Detroit, but I think Pacheco, just simply because of the scheme, is going to have some value.
Yeah, and he runs hard. Every time he touches the ball, he runs hard. He's going to be that guy. He's going to be that pounder. He's a guy that's going to come in on like 4th and 2 or 3rd and 2, probably get the ball and somehow break off a 15-yard run just because he will run through everything that's being piled up at him. This is a guy, like you alluded to, he's going to fill into that Montgomery role very nicely. I maybe not quite get the Knuckles nickname as Monty did, but he's going to fill that role. And to be honest, like you said, everyone forgot about Isaiah Pacheco. I forgot he was in Detroit till about 2 weeks ago when I was like looking around at my rosters and everything else. And I'm like, wait, what? And then I remembered that, yeah, he signed early earlier in the offseason with the Detroit Lions right after Monty went over to Houston, who's another guy that I'm sure in a couple weeks you'll be hearing us talk about as a guy that could be pretty cheaper in a starting running back, but we'll talk about that at a different time. My next guy is a guy that we have just not been able to see get on the field and stay on the field. He's played 3 games in his NFL career, and that's Jonathan Brooks. I know he's getting a lot of steam right now there in Carolina. I know they re-signed Chuba Hubbard. They let Rico Dowdle out the door. So there's plenty of touches left open there. I'm not 100% sure how many Rico had, but there's touches to be had in an offense that was starting to click and look a lot better near the end of the year. I know they had a couple down games throughout that stretch, but they started to click. That offense started to look a lot better. The running backs were starting to get rolling. And Jonathan Brooks, I mean, they spent a second-round draft pick, the 46th overall pick, so a high second-round draft pick on him. This is a guy that was explosive in college. He looked good in his preseason. He's looked good in drills. He's looked phenomenal when he's healthy. And this is a guy that I could easily see slowly creeping up that depth chart. I think he's going to start as the RB2 there, and I could easily see him slowly, week by week, creeping into Chuba Hubbard's role, because they're not going to give a full workload to Chuba Hubbard. As good as he is and as good as he has been, they've done it with splits. He's never been the full-time workhorse except for when I think Rico went down for 2 or 3 weeks. I could be flipping that around. Maybe Chuba went down and Rico had the full workload. But either way,
correct.
I don't see them trying to give the full workload to Chuba, even with that money. And I could easily see Jonathan Brooks trying to come out. I think it's his 3rd year, going into his 3rd year, still 22 years old. Yeah, going into his 3rd year. So he's going to be working on trying to get a contract, trying to stay in the pros. And so I think this is a guy that's going to run hard and try to make a little bit of money, and he's going to slowly creep into that depth chart. And this is a guy that a lot of people are sleeping on and completely forgot about him. I honestly thought about dropping him because he's been sitting on my taxi than my IR. But this is a guy that I just don't think I can part ways with quite yet.
Yeah, I'm going to be real honest with you, Brant. I was not a huge Jonathan Brooks guy coming out, sat behind Bijan Robinson, and then, kind of came in and did his own thing, had the gruesome knee injuries. Listen, Carolina's done right by Jonathan Brooks in my mind. They did not rush this back. They gave him plenty of time to rehab these ACLs. They have done this the right way. He's seeing top flight doctors. I forget some of the names of the doctors he's been with, but they've been with some other superstar players. He is rehabbed the right way. Carolina feels like he's good this year to come in and play. They've made sure they let him, sit on the shelf long enough that he could, 100% heal with no setbacks. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to be fantasy relevant this year. Whether or not he ends up taking it over from Chuba, my love for Chuba as an Oklahoma State Cowboy. I was a big Chuba fan coming out. We'll see. I think that Carolina offense is going to be pretty fun this year. I think they take a step forward as a team as well. And if Jonathan Brooks is healthy, I think he brings a explosive, option to that backfield, I guess, is what I'm looking for here. They've got some home run ability on the outside, Jalen Coker and Ted McMillan and some of those other pieces. But I do think Jonathan Brooks, if healthy, he adds some real value to this team. So, yeah, I think I agree with you on this one, Brant.
Okay.
All right, last one I got for everybody is a guy who also came onto the scene and kind of wreaked havoc. And I think people are going to have already forgotten about him as well. And that's Jordan Mason of the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Jones is still in town in Minnesota. Jordan Mason kind of came in relief of him last year when he got hurt. 8 games of double-digit fantasy points, 9 games of double-digit touches. Aaron Jones isn't getting any younger. Jordan Mason has already shown in a Kevin O'Connell offense that he can do the thing. Kevin O'Connell's going to bring him back with a decent amount of confidence. I don't think, and I feel like a lot of other people in this space, Brant, in the fantasy content creator space, are going to agree with you and I on this one. The Vikings offense can't possibly be as bad as it was last year, which means the running backs are going to be in better value touches than they were last year. The offensive line, I think, is going to be a little bit better. The quarterback situation is going to be a little bit better, one would think. I think Jordan Mason's another one that you can get tail into your drafts. He's going to have games where he is a top 15 back, and he's going to have others where he just safely chugs around, and he's a 30 to 35 range week in and week out guy. But I think if anything happens to Aaron Jones, you're talking about Jordan Mason as a guy you want in your lineups every single week. And again, I think when you go to talk about where the value is and where you can add a player, this is a guy that you're getting towards the tail end of the draft, because I think a lot of people are going to forget how good he was in Minnesota last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And going into the season last year, everybody was like, oh, is it Aaron Jones? Is it Jordan Mason? We clearly saw they wanted to sit with Aaron Jones, even when that offense looked abysmal. But I do think Mason, like you said, Jones isn't getting any younger. I think Mason brings that explosive ability to help that offense move forward. And I think they were just kind of trying to keep him under wraps a little bit last year as they knew they weren't going to be making it very far. So, yeah, I absolutely do love the Jordan Mason pick.
And I think it's worth mentioning, too, neither one of us brought him up, but I think Keaton Mitchell could be in the conversation here, I think, as well as I think you and I will talk about this guy a little bit more as the offseason progresses, but Katron Allen is another one that I think starts the season as a potential backup or handcuff. But I think as the season goes on, you talk about his fantasy value being relevant.
Yeah, Mitchell was a guy that I was looking at to talk about today. I just couldn't bring myself for him to maybe sneak into that backfield as we do see. But you've seen what Mike has done with A-Chain, and you bring almost the same skill set over there with Mitchell with his speed and his explosive ability. Man, I do think Mitchell could be easily fantasy relevant. I don't think he'll be the workhorse there, but he definitely could easily creep into that lineup.
Yeah, I think so. All right, Brent. Well, that kind of sums it up for the backup plan edition. I think we'll be back with something next week again, and then I'll do a solo while you're catching some tan, because we all know tan fat looks much better than pale fat, or even in this case, burnt fat. But it was good to get back and get into the lab and get one done together again. I know it's not, and I will soon experience it myself, but it's never as fun doing one by yourself as it is with the others. So, glad to be back.
Yeah, absolutely glad to be back. Going to do our best to bring one every single week, the best we can. Don't think we forgot about you with this beautiful Illinois weather we get. Sometimes the power just doesn't let us hang out, which is what we were hoping wasn't going to happen. And as we did, we were able to avoid it today. But like you said, that wraps it up for the backup plan. So as always, stay hungry.
Stay fat, my friends.